Picture a world on the brink of chaos. The year is 1939. In the heart of Europe, a storm was brewing. The continent, still recovering from the ravages of the Great War, was about to be plunged into darkness once again. The political and economic climate was a powder keg, waiting for a spark to ignite it. In Germany, that spark came in the form of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. Their rise to power was nothing short of meteoric. Hitler, a charismatic speaker, exploited the economic hardship and national humiliation felt in the wake of the Treaty of Versailles. He promised prosperity, unity, and a restored sense of German pride. The people, desperate for change, rallied behind him. But Hitler's vision for Germany was one of conquest and racial purity. His aggressive policies and blatant disregard for international law led to the annexation of Austria and the Sudetenland. His ambitions didn't stop there. In September of 1939, Hitler's forces invaded Poland, marking the beginning of a brutal campaign of expansion and domination. Meanwhile, in the East, the Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin was quietly consolidating power. In an unexpected move, Germany and the Soviet Union signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression agreement that shocked the world. This pact allowed both nations to avoid a two-front war and gave Hitler the freedom to pursue his plans in the West without fear of Soviet interference. But beneath the surface, the pact was a mere facade, a temporary alliance of convenience between two ideologically opposed powers. The world watched, helpless, as these events unfolded. Diplomacy had failed, and nations braced themselves for the inevitable. As tensions mounted globally, the stage was set for the largest and deadliest conflict in human history. The world watched in horror as Germany, like a ravenous beast, began to consume Europe. The early stages of the Second World War were marked by a relentless advance of the Axis powers. In the West, Germany's blitzkrieg tactics quickly overwhelmed Poland, Denmark, and Norway. The Netherlands, Belgium, and ultimately France fell in rapid succession. The French surrender in June of 1940 was a significant blow to the Allies, and it left Britain standing alone against the Axis onslaught. The Battle of Britain, fought in the skies over the United Kingdom, was a crucial turning point. The Royal Air Force, outnumbered but not outmatched, held their ground against the German Luftwaffe. Their resilience denied Germany air superiority and a clear path for invasion, marking one of the first major checks to Hitler's expansion. Simultaneously, in the East, the Holocaust had begun. Jews, political dissidents, homosexuals, and others deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime were systematically rounded up and sent to concentration and extermination camps. The scale of this atrocity was unthinkable, a horror that would only be fully revealed as the war progressed. Across the world in the Pacific, Japan had been expanding its empire. In a bid to neutralize the United States Pacific Fleet, Japan launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in December of 1941. This event, which President Franklin D. Roosevelt described as a date which will live in infamy, propelled the United States into the war, marking a significant shift in the balance of power. The United States' entry into the war brought fresh resources and resolve to the beleaguered Allies. The war was no longer a European conflict. It had become a truly global struggle. The Axis powers, with their initial successes, had indeed awakened a sleeping giant. By the end of 1941, the world was fully embroiled in a war of unprecedented scale. 1942 marked a turning point in this global conflict. It was a year of monumental battles and significant shifts in the balance of power. The Battle of Stalingrad, a brutal confrontation between the Axis and Soviet forces, played out over several months from the summer of 1942 into early 1943. It was a battle of attrition, a grinding, relentless struggle where every inch of ground was fiercely contested. The city, named after Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, held immense symbolic value. Its loss would have been a severe blow to Soviet morale. However, the Red Army held the line, turning the city into a deadly trap for the invading forces. The eventual Soviet victory marked a crucial turning point on the Eastern Front. Simultaneously, on the other side of the world, the Battle of Midway was unfolding. In the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, this naval battle between the United States and Japan would prove pivotal. The Japanese hoped to eliminate the US as a strategic power in the Pacific, but the US forces, aided by superior intelligence and strategy, won a decisive victory. This battle marked the first major defeat for the Japanese Navy and shifted the momentum of the Pacific War. As 1943 rolled around, the Allies sought to drive a wedge into the Axis powers' European stronghold. The invasion of Italy, launched in July of that year, represented the first major Allied assault on a European Axis power. The campaign was long and costly, but it succeeded in diverting German resources and attention, further tipping the balance of power in favour of the Allies. By 1943, the tide of war was turning, but the road to victory was still paved with blood and sacrifice. The events of these crucial years were not just a turning point in the war, but a turning point in the course of human history, a testament to the resilience of nations and the indomitable spirit of humanity. 1944, the Allies are closing in. The year that marked a significant turning point in the Second World War. On the 6th of June, an event that would go down in history as D-Day took place. The largest seaborne invasion ever was launched on the beaches of Normandy, France. Thousands of Allied troops stormed the shores, a bold move that began to tip the scales against the Axis powers. Just 2 months later, the city of Paris, which had been under Nazi control for 4 long, dark years, breathed a sigh of relief. The city was liberated by the Allied forces, marking a significant milestone in the war and providing a much-needed morale boost for the war-weary Allies. Yet the Axis powers were not going down without a fight. As winter approached, they launched a desperate counter-offensive known as the Battle of the Bulge. It was the last major German offensive on the Western Front, and while it initially caught the Allies off guard, the push was ultimately repelled, further weakening the Nazi stronghold. In the midst of this tumultuous warfare, the leaders of the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union convened in Yalta, a city on the coast of the Black Sea. This Yalta Conference, held in February 1945, was a strategic meeting where these leaders discussed their plans for post-war Europe. It was there that they agreed to demand Germany's unconditional surrender, setting the stage for the end of the Third Reich. With the Allies advancing from both the east and the west, the once mighty Third Reich found itself cornered. The tide of the war had turned irrevocably against them. The Yalta Conference had sealed their fate, and the relentless Allied forces were closing in. As 1945 dawned, the fall of the Third Reich was imminent. The clock was ticking, and the end was near for one of the most notorious regimes in history. The stage was set for the final act of World War II. In the early months of 1945, the end of the war was in sight. The Allied forces were closing in on Berlin, the heart of the Third Reich. The city fell in May. Its streets, once filled with the marching boots of the Nazi regime, now echoed with the victorious cheers of the Allies. In a bunker beneath these war-torn streets, Adolf Hitler, the man who had plunged the world into chaos, took his own life. His dream of a 1,000-year Reich lay in ruins, just like the city above him. Days later, Germany offered its unconditional surrender. The European theatre of war had come to a close, but halfway across the globe the war raged on. The Pacific theatre was a different beast altogether. The Allied forces faced a determined and ferocious enemy in Imperial Japan. Traditional warfare had proven ineffective, and a new, horrifying weapon was brought to bear. In August 1945, the world held its breath as the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The devastating power of these bombs brought a swift end to the war. Japan surrendered, marking the official end of World War II. But the war's end was not a moment of unalloyed joy. The world had witnessed the destructive power of nuclear weapons. Cities lay in ruins, millions had lost their lives, and those who survived were left to pick up the pieces. In the aftermath, nations began to rebuild. The United Nations was formed, a beacon of hope and cooperation in a world that had known too much conflict. The world had changed irrevocably, marked by the scar of this great war. World War II was over, but its impact would be felt for generations to come. The lessons learned from this devastating conflict continue to shape our world today, a poignant reminder of the cost of war and the price of peace.